guidance options with a sports science degree, and one of them was to try and find any job possible in a sports governing body, whatever that was. Another was to work in a gym, which I didn't really fancy, and a third was to teach, and that sounded the most appealing, and I'm glad I did, because loved it ever since.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, because I know a lot of people that have just, fallen into it. For me, my career journey was different because I always wanted to be a teacher, but I know others, it just kind of was just there and they, have fallen in love with it. Tom has joined us and he has said evening. So, evening to you, Tom. I can see Jenny has entered the live studio. So, evening, Jenny and Sequin Girly. So, evening to everybody that is entering. Okay, thank you so much, Nick. And you, I come across your blog, and I know you've spoken at Research Ed in terms of leadership. I think your blog is fantastic, not just for head teachers, but for those that lead multiple schools or are leading an academy. Um, can you tell us why you actually wrote your blog? Like, what made you start your blog?
It was a good few years ago, and I think, to be honest, it was just a way of writing down what I was thinking or what I was working on, and for a very long time, I don't think anybody read it, but it was useful for me, and it still remains useful for me. So I tend to write about whatever I'm thinking about at the time, and if other people find it useful, then great.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, it is. It has been useful, especially because I'm in the middle of writing my action plan for my department as a middle leader, and your blog has got really good tips in terms of formulating action plans and making sure that actually what we are writing down is going to like manifest within the department. So, thank you for that.
No
Um,
problem.
so, what latest research have you helped in terms of your leadership? That has helped you in terms of your leadership? Because one thing I do love about your blog is that it is embedded in research. So, on a personal level, what's the latest research that has helped you in terms of your leadership?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily latest, because,
Yeah.
but there's a number of things that I think I've kind of read recently, which have really helped me to think more clearly about leadership. And the first one that springs to mind is anything from Vivian Robinson. Her work is kind of amazing. It's one of those where you think, I wish I'd read about this and learned this earlier on. And that seems to be a kind of a pattern, really. You come across something
Yeah.
interesting and good when you think, I wish someone had told me that
Yeah.
earlier.
Mm,
And
yeah.
her one is the one that I like in the most at the moment is a really short paper that she's written about capabilities for leading improvement, and she puts it so well. I think it's a really simple model where she talks about expertise being kind of using knowledge, and that's not just kind of book smart knowledge, but the knowledge and experience, and contextual knowledge, using knowledge to solve problems, all the while building trust. I think it's a really nice
Mm.
summary of what school leaders need to be doing, because it encapsulates it quite nicely.
And how do you like build, solve problems whilst building trust? Could you give us a tip in terms of that?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to think that I kind of half decent at doing that, but I
Yeah.
think I think trust comes down to, first of all, credibility.
Mm,
You have to show that you know what you're doing,
yeah.
and that's fundamental to all of it, really. Because I think the really important point that she makes, and another thing I like about the model, is that the use of her use of language is so precise. There's not a word wasted, and one of the points she makes is that the school improvement work is done alongside building trust.
Wow.
But sometimes leaders can do things that kind of, they find it hard. Sometimes leaders find it hard to kind of maintain trust while doing the difficult stuff, having the difficult conversations. And some really interesting stuff that she's done about open to learning conversations, which only really just scratching the surface of. But uh, it's about having those conversations, being open and honest, and not not fishing for responses that you think someone else can give. I mean, the typical example is observing a lesson that for some reason you think doesn't go well, and then that awful question that some people ask of, how do you think that went?
Oh yeah.
It's just so loaded. It's so loaded with kind of emotion, and it feels like that whoever's saying that is hoping that the other person will say the feedback that they want to give, so they don't have to do it.
Well, that's a really good point in terms of that. Oh, thank you, Nick. And yeah, so in terms of, the systems that are needed, because I can see from your blog that you've written a lot in terms of school improvement. So what systems would you say are needed to implement strategic priorities? Because I guess before lead on school improvement, you have to think, what are your priorities and what do you think you're going to tackle? So what would you say are needed to implement strategic priorities?
I think clarity.
Mm,
Clarity, number one, is what leaders need to have. The leaders need to know exactly what it is that they're trying to achieve and have a good reason for it. But whatever leaders decide to do, it all depends on how it's done. I mean, you could have the best intention or the best strategy in the world, but how it's implemented makes all the difference. And I think there are a couple of things that really have to be there before you do anything. Before you try and implement an interesting new strategy, behavior has to be good. Teachers need to be able to be in a safe enough place to be able to try new things, or to
wow.
or to even allocate the cognitive kind of space to be able to think about things. And sometimes, unfortunately, some teachers do spend all their time thinking about behavior. And if you
Yeah.
don't get that right in the first place, there's no way teachers are going to be able to try something new, or to do the thing that you're asking them to. It starts with behavior. Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, I was going to say, just in terms of like my department, I find that in order to, bring about sufficient change, I've seen from a middle leadership point of view that staff have to feel comfortable in terms of the knowledge. And I feel like in terms of behavior, what you just said, I think that's the bread and butter, I guess, of and the foundation for any change to really and truly take root. Because if you don't have the behavior there, then the change isn't going to flourish, I suppose. So I definitely agree with that. And what you said about safety, that's very paramount.
I think once that's sorted, well, if that's sorted, then there's also the thing about what teachers normally do with their time. So if leaders are trying to implement something new, it's undoubtedly going to be something on top of what already happens. So if teachers are already stretched, working long hours, have a high workload, then nothing's going to be successful if you're adding to that. So before you do any kind of innovation or trying to implement something new, it's the existing systems that need streamlining, or kind of getting rid of superfluous things first. Like for example, curriculum planning. Teachers spend most of their time when they're not teaching planning lessons. But if we can do the whole Amazon thing with things like that. Many years ago, Amazon, when you're buying things, you had to kind of click several times, input numbers, that kind of thing, input addresses.
Yeah.
But now Amazon, you can buy something with just one click, and
Yeah.
it's really good, it's really easy.
Yeah.
And if we can get to a stage where teachers can remove the number of clicks, reduce the number of clicks for teachers to do the things that they have to do day in, day out, then eventually it could then free up kind of working memory to be able to attend to anything new that we want them to do.
I really like that, because with our current year 11s, I said that I would really like, for example, because we have an end of unit assessments, but for current year 11s, don't really necessarily have sufficient amount of practice beyond those assessments. So, I said I would like the 11s to have more practice in terms of exam questions, and staff are able to do that because the planning is taken away because we're well resourced, so they do have the time to
Yeah.
actually do that. And then the marking policy as well isn't too strenuous either. So you're so right about clarity and making sure that we have those systems that actually allow for innovation to take place. I really do agree with that.
So those two things are before we even get to trying to implement anything, because it's not all schools have the right environment in order for something new or a new initiative to do well. So I suppose when if behaviour is right, if curriculum and workload and planning and all the things that you mentioned there about marking and feedback, if they're all as minimal as possible while still being effective, then only then can we think about implementing something new. And then the system that's most important is how we go about CPD. And that, I mean, it's so easy to get it really badly wrong. Kind of typical one would be kind of having a meeting with teachers, mandating a change, saying this is what's going to happen, and then expecting it to happen. Because I think often
Yeah.
leaders kind of fall into a trap where, because they've thought about something for a while and then it culminates in a staff meeting, for them it's really clear because they've been thinking about it. But then for the people that they're talking to, it might be brand new. And so
Yeah.
it's easy to fall into that trap as leaders, as of assuming that other people have done the thinking that you have, and that declaring victory too soon, expecting things to happen immediately after one staff meeting, and even worse, then walking around with a clipboard to check it's happening.
Yeah.
It's not conducive to it's kind of a new initiative sticking.
That's
It's
actually
difficult one.
really really interesting point that you made, because my next question, just in line with what you just said, is how do we ensure that those under us actually understand our thinking? Because just before Christmas, I had like a interview in order to see if, not Christmas, I mean just before we broke up from summer. I had a interview with like our school improvement advisor, just to see if we were ready for like a bit of like a mini mock stead, but not
Yeah.
completely. And one of the questions said, one of the comments he said was that actually I really understand, the curriculum thinking, and I really understand where it's going, but if that also would the rest of the department sing from the same hymn sheet? Will they be able to articulate the same thing that I'm saying? And I was like, actually, you're right there. And it kind of posed a mirror to something that I haven't actually quite done in my department. So, what advice would you give to middle leaders or executives or other leaders in terms of making sure that staff understand, you know, innovation or new techniques or whatever's introduced?
I think the first and the most important one is plenty of conversations. I think you need there's too much assumption
Wow.
that others, like even just through sending things to read or stuff like that, it's too open to different kind of scenarios. It's the conversations that drive that. And then I think it comes back to clarity as well. I mean, what I found really useful the last couple of years is the EEF's implementation guidance for schools. It runs through in quite a lot of detail what's suggested as effective implementation. But the one thing that I think that has made the biggest difference is being really clear on active ingredients of a strategy.
Yeah.
The things that have to happen in order for the strategy to work. So what we've done recently is to try and be really clear on those, the concepts, the behaviors that we expect to be seen. And if you're really clear on those, it's much easier for others to build their knowledge around those things or to actually do them. Because sometimes, again, leaders can often be too vague in what they want because maybe they don't understand it fully themselves. It's a lot of work in the preparation phase and the exploration phase to have that clarity. And too often we go too quick to change.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. I can see more people joining, so welcome everyone. So TSCW, welcome. Pet Hog, Ria, Love, Colin, welcome. And Tom has said, whoever's cooking whilst doing this, I'm very impressed with your multitasking skills. Thanks, Tom, who always brings the fun along. But it's so true, though. Whoever is cooking, I'm really, really impressed. Um, yeah, and I'm just like what you said about, just multiple communication and stuff, and something that because we've brought in quite a few changes, especially with Key Stage 3, because I teach history. I've said to my department, I know this is a new curriculum, it is resourced, but if you want to see this in action, look at my timetable, my door's open,
Yes.
So I think as well, like demonstrating and modeling that change as well helps. Yeah. So my next question is, what tips do you have for bringing in change as a leader? I think we kind of touched on that, but I don't know if you've got anything else in terms of
Yeah.
bringing in change.
I was listening to one of the talks at Research Ed a couple of weeks ago, and it was, I think it was Matt Evans, Becky Allen, and Ben White, and they were talking about their upcoming book called The Next Big Thing. And what they said really kind of made me think, because they were talking about how, they were quite thought-provoking about the EEF, for example. So the EEF has now become quite a kind of a go-to place for school leaders to have a think about particular strategies they might want to implement in school, based on kind of the strength of the evidence and the cost implications. But I won't do their talk any justice at all. But what they made me think about was that changing something isn't necessarily a good thing to do. I mean, because it's all about implementation, and sometimes a change is simply a change and not an improvement. And I think the first thing that leaders need to understand is that change and improvement aren't the same thing.
Wow.
They it's really tempting to make a change as a leader because you have a preference, or because your head gets turned by a shiny thing that a school down the road is doing, or you see something on Twitter. It is really easy to jump and do something without fully understanding it, and it could just then be a change and not an improvement. And we need to guard against that kind of thing, because change is tiring, change is upsetting sometimes, especially if it's managed badly. So we have to be sure in the first place that what we're looking at could be an improvement and not just a change.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good tip, actually, because I think lots of people see change and improvement really interchangeably, and actually you're right, it is something different. It could be just looking at the systems or what is being taught or policies, and just thinking, okay, what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be refined, what needs to be improved, instead of changing the whole thing. So yeah, that's actually, it's so simple actually, but it's eye-opening. It's often the simple things that we kind of neglect.
I think to add to that, I mean, in the last few weeks, I've gone from a head teacher of one school to an executive of two, and one of the things that I keep saying to everyone is, I'm not interested in change, I'm interested in improvement, because there's always the kind of worry that a new person comes in and changes things. But one of the really important kind of considerations for change is that you have to try and solve the problems that exist, but not import someone else's solutions. So, for example, two different schools right next to each other, two very different behavior strategies or ways of managing behavior. And who am I to say that the one in the school where I'm established is the right one or the better one? Because the school next door, that is now part of the federation, they've been absolutely fine for many years without any behavior problems. And why then would I import a solution that has been established in one school to another, regardless of context? It's a really hard thing for leaders to do, is to stop themselves from just following their own preferences and thinking that they're right, when the most likely thing is that we're probably wrong about stuff, we're probably misjudged, don't know the full picture, and therefore have to be more careful about how we go about solving problems.
I like that. And, just to kind of touch on in terms of you managing two schools, what is that like? Because I know it's so much pressure just managing one school, especially in the context of COVID. So, what has it been like, managing two schools?
It's I kind of underestimated a little bit. I thought it'd be a bit like managing one bigger school,
Yeah.
because it's not like they're two different phases. So there's a junior and an infant. So it's a
Oh,
bit like,
wow.
in terms of location, they're on the same site.
Yeah.
In terms of age range, there's no overlap. It's for one school feeds the next.
Yeah.
And in terms of size, I mean, combined is about 600-700 children. So
Wow.
it's no bigger than kind of a decent sized primary, but actually
Oh,
it is very, very different. There's two different buildings, two different cultures, two different ways of working. And
yeah.
I did know that, but I didn't fully appreciate um, how how much mental energy goes into switching between the two.
Because you
Because
must have to be really adaptable and flexible to like assimilate into two different
yeah, yeah,
cultures. Yeah.
and so I might be doing two. I might be doing the same thing in both schools. For example, looking at pupil premium strategy.
Yeah.
But actually, the way that I need to do it is completely different in both schools, because I have existing relationships in one and a way of working, and no
Yeah.
existing relationships in another, which need to
Oh,
be done
yeah.
before any work is done. So it's 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 tricky, but it's a lot of fun to try and get it right, because
Mm.
it's a challenge. I'm enjoying it.
And how do you, I'm just so interested in this. I'm so sorry. I'm like going
No,
off
go
of
ahead.
the questions that I originally sent to you. But so how do you build these relationships? Because you've got, as you said, you've got one school where you've got these existing relationships, but the
Mm.
other one where you know you're still kind of finding yourself. So how do you um build, or how are you building those relationships? 'Cause I think that's quite tricky.
Yeah, yeah. So on a very simple level, um, uh, get to know names very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Try and see every person every day and have even the briefest of conversations. First of all, is visibility. You need
Mm,
to show that you're there, and
yeah.
uh, because if you're not there, then there's no one to trust, or no one to kind of attach any ideas to. And so and then the next bit is just listening. Like I've
Yeah.
asked the same question. I'm working through everybody to ask the same thing. What is it that works really well? What do we need to protect in this school?
Oh, I
What
like
is it
that.
that
What?
you think?
That's sorry, Nick. Sorry, I had to pause you there because I
No,
think
go on.
that question there is just like you know, an asterisk, like star question, because so often I think leaders come in and think, what can we improve? What can we change? But not necessarily
Mm,
what can we protect. I think that's a very
yeah.
key question that's not really asked. So, yeah, sorry, that just kind of struck a nerve in me. Carry on. Sorry.
No, the reason that's important is because it's a new federation, and
Yeah.
um, there's well, the dynamics are such that we from the outset deliberately wanted to make sure that it didn't ever look like one school taking over another, because it's not like that.
Mm,
But when the head is coming from one, when the executive head was the head of one of the schools, then there's always that risk of whatever comes out your mouth seeming like you're making them like your school. So,
yeah.
and that's always, it was from the outset, is that what the governing board are trying to avoid. It's what I've talked about with leaders to try and avoid, and therefore the way that I can show that I'm taking that seriously is tell me what it is that needs protecting. Because if
Mm.
those are the things that are important to people, those are the things that have led to the success of the school. So therefore, why would I change them?
I love that. Thank you, Nick. I'm
Not at
sorry,
all.
I'm struggling to hear you just a tiny bit because of the noise in the background. So sorry. Um,
Okay.
and then my next question there, I think this is a show for every leader to listen into.
Mm.
Actually, before I go into, the questions that I sent to you, I was going to ask, how do you um manage, your time between both schools? Do you give one more to the other, or how do you decide like which how you're going to manage your time?
This, at first, there was nothing more scientific than one day here, one day there, one day here, one day
Yeah.
there. But the reality is that that can't be the case, because if I went a whole day without seeing people in either school, then that's, I mean, to go missing would show I'm not taking them seriously in either school. So
Wow.
for the established school, it's different for them because they used to see them every day.
Oh, sorry, we've got a caller in. Sorry, Nick.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, hopefully you can carry on. But hi caller, I don't know your name, sorry, because it's not got your name on there. Do you have a question for Nick or a comment? Just echoing a bit. Okay, I guess not. Sorry, Nick, you can continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the colleagues in the school where I was previously head, then not seeing them every day when I did before is a bit change that I need to be wary of. But also in the school that I've come to lead, I need to be seeing people every day. Otherwise, what value am I bringing? I need to be there in order to have good conversations and therefore provide that reassurance and space to listen. So it's, I mean, it started off as one day here, one day there, but realistically, it's both schools every day because we're right next to each other on the same site, which is lucky, because if it's across town, it'd be a lot harder.
Yeah, you must do like a lot of steps.
Yes.
During the day. Yeah, so I guess that's another positive thing. Because it's a bit similar to my school, because my school's a 12 entry form school, and we've got 2 sites, well, 2 campuses.
12 form entry.
Yeah. So from year 7 all the way to year 13 as well.
Okay.
So it's a 12 form entry school. So there's about 360 students in each year group.
Wow.
And we've got 2 campuses which are about 10 minutes away from each other. And one thing that because myself and another colleague, we predominantly teach A levels, and because we predominantly teach A level, it mostly requires us, well, myself especially, on one side, whereas I'm not that visible as head of history on the other side because of my timetable. So what you've said, has, rung bells in me as a middle leader. So next year, I'm going to try to make sure actually that I'm more visible on the other side. So for example, I'm on the other side tomorrow, period 1, and stay there till period 2. But that's actually not enough because my history students at the other side don't know who I am, even though I've got great staff on the other side, which they do a fantastic job. But it's just it's not the same.
Must be difficult. It must be really tricky.
Yeah, it is, because I'm having meetings with, some year 11 teachers. I'm thinking, these students are underperforming. Can you tell me why? Because I don't really know them. Whereas on the other side, I know about a student, I see them. And so it's something that is on my kind of improvement plan for next year, about being more visible on the other side of the school. Yeah, so it's interesting to hear, your experiences on like a dual site.
Yes.
My next question is, do you have any tips for leaders on how to build trust and what attributes are needed for this? So this is, something that you're going through, I guess, with one of your schools. So I think this is really interesting to hear.
I think the trust comes from, first of all, people knowing that you're, or having some reassurance that you can do what your job is, that you have some sort of competence that you can do it. And I think that comes from time, and you have to constantly prove yourself in the eyes of others through decision making, through conversations. And I think that first one is really important.
Oh, sorry. I think that was a caller. I'll get them on soon.
So the first is competence. You have to show that you know what you're doing, and the only way you can do that is making good decisions and having lots of conversations about them, really. But then there's other parts that I think are important. One is predictability. People have to know or have some clue about how you'll react in different situations, and that comes through good times and through bad. Sometimes heads' moods can completely change the climate in a school if they're annoyed by something, if they're worried about something, if they're if something's niggling at them, it can affect everyone. And I think heads need to manage their emotions and be predictable in situations and be calm and reasoned even in the most difficult of circumstances, because then that kind of exudes a bit of reassurance on everyone else.
I really like that. So it's like predictability and capability
Yes.
helps to build trust. We've got a caller. His name, his or her name is Jakir. I don't know if you've got a question. Hello. No. Okay. I don't think he or she is with us. If you do have a question, please do type your question in the chat. And yeah, pose the question or the comment. But thank you so much, Nick. Before I proceed, we're just gonna have a quick break, and then we've got more questions in terms of leadership.
Need support with your phonics teaching? Did you know Oxford University Press now has 3 DFE validated programs to help you? Rewrite Ink Phonics, Floppy's Phonics, and the brand new Essential Letters and Sounds. Essential Letters and Sounds will get all your children reading well, quickly, using phonics books you may already have in your classroom. Developed by the Knowledge Schools Trust English Hub, it's affordable, easy to use, and makes teaching phonics with letters and sounds more effective. Whatever your school's phonics needs, Oxford has the solution. To find out more and receive support from your expert local educational consultant, visit oxfordprimary.com/phonics. Do you struggle with people pleasing? Is it a constant battle managing different and difficult personalities? Why not inspire, challenge, and empower your team through the MAL CPD Essential Coaching Skills for School Leaders course, or gain practical skills to become a strong and compassionate leader through the Assertive Leadership and the Emotionally Intelligent Leader courses. All MAL CPD courses are accredited by the Institute of Leadership and Management. Find out more at www.malcpd.com. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful, and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
Welcome back. I have got Nick with us, Nick Hart, and he is in charge of 2 schools, and he's a course leader for the NQ. I can never remember the abbreviation.
It's the MPQH.
MPQH, thank you.
Yeah.
Within the Ambition and Institute. Yeah. So in terms, we just listened to advert for MAL CPD, and I really like that in terms of being an assertive leader. And it's something that I've had to thanks, Tom. I've just seen your comment. I'm in all both of your leadership responsibilities. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, it's something that I've had struggled with as a leader in terms of being assertive. I remember the first time I said no, I was literally shivering in my shoes. Yeah, I just thought, as I was listening to that advert, I just wanted to pose that question to you. How can you be assertive but fair, or like warm, if that makes sense? How do you strike the balance? Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I remember many years ago, that's a lot of leadership training that was available was about that kind of thing. It's about having courageous conversations or things like that. But I think where that went wrong is that it was all done out of context. So there was a lot of training available. I remember going to a lot about things like having difficult conversations, and it was all done out of context. Whereas in fact, always when those things have to happen, difficult conversations are rooted in kind of day-to-day work and kind of extensive knowledge of kind of education, but also the people that we're working with. And I think that's missing. I think if if you really do know everyone in the school really well, and you've been really, really clear on what it is that the school is backing to be good practice, or how people should kind of behave, or even just or teach even, then I think it's a lot easier to have those conversations. I think where I've seen examples of difficult conversations gone wrong is because people didn't know what was expected of them. There was lack of clarity from leaders, and therefore kind of it is always going to be a tricky one. And I'm not sure about this assertive thing anyway, because I think we're adults. I think everyone who works in a school does it with the best of intentions because they want to make a difference to children. I think the minute you have to be kind of assertive with someone, the relationship possibly isn't right. And yeah, and I think that the whole being assertive. I mean, is that typical thing, isn't it, of your teacher voice, using your teacher voice with people at home, which is kind of. We're all adults, we're all grown-ups. No one is better or than the other, and I think conversations where people are on the level and equal are far more useful, where you listen rather than try and impose practice on someone else.
That's a really good point, because something that I really identified from the advert was, do you struggle with people pleasing? I'm just thinking, oh my God, that's me. Yeah, and I think as a leader, it's not the best quality to have, because you can never please anyone. Is a quality that I need to work on, I guess, because it's always
I think it just comes down to, is it the right thing for children? Is whatever you're talking about, is that the right thing for the children? And that's what really matters. But it's sometimes it's not always about that. Leaders need to make decisions sometimes for the benefit of staff, because a happy staff who is working hard and committed to the school will bring benefits to children. So it's not. I don't think it's as simple as do it for the children, put children first. Because if we put children first, we'd have teachers who worked into the ground and underappreciated, because we just accept more and more and more and more of them. Whereas happy, motivated staff who feel like they belong and are supported are going to do the best that they can, because they'll have that attitude anyway. And if that support is coming from leaders, then they're far more likely to give all they can to the children in front of them.
Thank you, Nick. The next question is, what is expertise in school leadership? Because on your blog you've got lots of diagrams, lots of, I say that, geocoding, organized. Yeah, I love that. So what would you say is the ingredients in terms of expertise in school leadership?
I think this is really interesting, and it's what I've spent a lot of time recently thinking about. And I think there's a bit of a shift happening at the moment in terms of what we understand to be expert leadership. I mean, school leadership has always borrowed from kind of other domains. There was kind of, in the last few decades, there's been kind of all sorts of leadership research from other fields like business or sport and that kind of thing. And I think that has been the dominant kind of model of leadership. And I'm sure we can all think of leadership training where we've done things like change management or having a vision or communication and stuff like that. And these are all, they sound quite generic things. And I think school leadership has fallen into a trap in the last few years of focusing on kind of these leadership skills or traits. So you have like, I don't know if I haven't seen one for a little while, but it's quite common to have head teacher adverts or senior leader adverts asking for someone who's dynamic or inspirational or charismatic.
Yeah, that's a big one, charismatic.
Yes, and I don't know. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't kind of class myself as that. And I think it's unhelpful for leaders as well, because you can't work on your charisma. You can't be more dynamic or be more inspirational, because they're all kind of quite abstract concepts. And I think that's where that kind of model of expertise falls down, because you need to ask, all right, if being dynamic and being inspirational is a way of thinking about leadership expertise, how do you get more of it? Because that's really what we should be doing. We should try and become more expert. And if we're thinking of leadership in those abstract nouns, it's really hard to think of how you get better. Whereas what seems to be happening more recently, and what's becoming more and more kind of visible in leadership discourse is the importance of knowledge, the importance of domain-specific knowledge. I mean, from what I've seen and what I've read, a lot of models of leadership now, school leadership, are championing the importance of teachers who, head teachers and senior leaders who really know education inside out. And that's only a small part of it. So there's lots of things that good leaders need to know. They need to know plenty about curriculum. They need to know plenty about staffing and HR and finance and pedagogy and all sorts of things. But some of the most interesting stuff that's come out of that research is that head teachers and other leaders who have extensive knowledge in teaching and learning, they're the ones who can bring about the best improvement in schools.
Oh, wow.
But it's not just that. I mean, it's not just a case of, because one of the challenges to that is there must be more to it. There must be more to it than knowledge. And I think there is. I mean, it kind of echoes the kind of knowledge skills stuff that's been happening in schools for the last few years as well. But I think it's not just knowing stuff. So knowing safeguarding, knowing curriculum, it's not just that. It's knowing your school really, really well. Because you need to, no matter how much you know about a curriculum or safeguarding or behavior or any of those common things, it's the knowledge of your own school that really makes a difference in terms of what you do with that. So the school context, who you've got, who's good at what, and who needs to improve, and how an idea might go down, and all those things. And in fact, knowledge of yourself. Like, for example, I know that I rush into things. I get overexcited and forget to tell people things, and run 100 miles an hour ahead. And I need to stop myself, because I know that's the thing, and therefore I need other people as well to kind of rein me in a little bit. And all that together, I think, if you take that as under that broad heading of domain-specific knowledge, knowing a lot is a prerequisite to doing all the things that leaders need to do. All the decisions that leaders need to make are rooted in knowing stuff. And that's the whole point of leadership development. I think leaders need to develop their knowledge of educational issues, of their own school, so that when it comes to making decisions, we get better at it. I mean, the pandemic was a perfect example. Back in spring 2020, all of a sudden schools were closed, and we had to switch the model of schooling completely. Especially remote learning, and none of us had done it before at any scale. And so it was all new to us. And that first response, I don't know about you, but in my school, the first response was nowhere near as good as the second.
Same.
Because we knew more. We knew more about what worked and what didn't, about what was expected and what wasn't, and our decisions were better as a result.
Yeah, that's so true. So what would you say, like, how can head teachers know more? What tips would you give for head teachers or leaders to know more?
So it depends what. So if it's the kind of formal knowledge of curriculum leadership or safeguarding issues, there's plenty of ways of doing that. There's courses, there's books, there's blogs, there's social media. That's the easy bit. I say it's the easy bit. It's still a bit that we all still need to learn. I mean, the amount of knowledge that we all need to lead is incredible. And people always have blind spots. But I mean that's the easy bit in terms of how accessible it is and how it can be easily shared. But the hard bit is the knowledge of your own school. And I think one of the big distinguishing the big distinctions I want to make is that the experience and expertise are not the same thing.
Oh, sorry, that's my dog. Carry on. Sorry about that. Second week in a row.
The experience and expertise aren't the same thing. So a head could be a head teacher for 15 years. And doing it for that long doesn't mean that they're any more expert than someone who's been doing it for 5 years, because time served isn't the same as expertise.
Yeah.
If you're doing the same thing over and over again and not reacting and not solving problems and not developing knowledge, then that's just a number. It's not expertise. So I think experience is important as long as we're learning from it. So one of the things that SLT should do quite regularly is debrief decisions. So if someone has made a decision, if it's the head, for example, that's made a decision about, for example, an exclusion, then the way to help other people is to talk about the decision-making process. What did you know?
Yeah.
What information did you have? What decision did you make? Did it work? Would you do anything different next time? Because then that helps others. It helps other people then to make decisions if they were going to happen again in the future. Because actually that's what we're doing. We're problem solving, and problem solving is rooted in, have I seen a similar problem to this before? What happened last time? Did it work? Just like the pandemic response. So I think the debriefing is really, really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. Yeah, and I really liked what you said, that we can be in something for a long time, but it's about what you learn from that at the end of the day. Yeah, I like that. And sorry about the noise.
That's all right.
Yeah. So we're just gonna go. Gonna pass over to Gail, who's going to share the latest educational news, and then we'll hit it back again with more questions. So take it over, Gail.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn. A report for BBC News suggests that virtual parents' evenings were one of the few successes to come out of lockdown. Parents could avoid queues to speak to teachers, appointments were punctual, and separated parents could both attend more easily. Educators seemed to like the system too, with the then Education Recovery Commissioner, Sir Kevin Collins, saying in May that that particular aspect of school life would never be the same again. Zoom for parents' evenings is much better than trying to find a car parking space on a wet Tuesday and waiting your turn, he said. Educational Technology Advisor and London Borough of Havering Senior Inspector, Dave Smith, agrees that online versions are here to stay. Online parent and carer meetings have proved very successful in schools, he says. Colleagues have outlined benefits for parents and carers who can dial into meetings from wherever they are, when previously they might not have been able to attend a meeting due to work or other commitments, has allowed better engagement and attendance rates. Scotland's biggest teachers' union has hit out at the resumption of school inspections during disruption. The EIS was reported in the Edinburgh Evening News as saying the return of scrutiny activity inspections, announced on the Education Scotland website, would undermine any progress to securing the well-being of pupils and staff. School inspections were paused in March of last year to allow schools to focus on education recovery. EIS General Secretary Larry Flanagan said, "The move showed that Education Scotland and the Scottish Government were deeply out of touch with the reality that schools are currently facing amidst record levels of pupil and teacher COVID-related absence, and therefore significant ongoing disruption." According to Mr Flanagan, school inspectors were of limited value pre-pandemic in terms of supporting learning and teaching, and to reintroduce them now is somewhat nonsensical. A spokesman for Education Scotland said, "As has been the case since the beginning of the pandemic, HMIE are committed to supporting recovery across the education system and learn from practitioners about the work underway to address the impact of COVID-19. This has been your daily education news briefing.
Need support with your phonics teaching? Did you know Oxford University Press now has 3 DFE validated programs to help you? Read Write Ink Phonics, Floppy's Phonics, and the brand new Essential Letters and Sounds. Essential Letters and Sounds will get all your children reading well, quickly, using phonics books you may already have in your classroom. Developed by the Knowledge Schools Trust English Hub, it's affordable, easy to use, and makes teaching phonics with letters and sounds more effective. Whatever your school's phonics needs, Oxford has the solution. To find out more and receive support from your expert local educational consultant, visit oxfordprimary.com/phonics. Do you struggle with people pleasing? Is it a constant battle managing different and difficult personalities? Why not inspire, challenge, and empower your team through the MAL CPD Essential Coaching Skills for School Leaders course? Or gain practical skills to become a strong and compassionate leader through the Assertive Leadership and the Emotionally Intelligent Leader courses. All MAL CPD courses are accredited by the Institute of Leadership and Management. Find out more at www.malcpd.com. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful, and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
Can you hear me?
Emily, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I was talking and I was on mute. Oh, so sorry. I don't think anybody heard what I was saying. Can you hear? Oh, thank you for to TSCW just saying hello. I was talking the whole way through and I
wow.
didn't realise I was saying. That's so embarrassing. You know what?
We've all done it.
Yeah, we've all done it, especially during
Yeah.
what is it? Especially during COVID with Zoom
Yeah.
or Teams. I was just saying, what are your opinions? Because we heard about the news in terms of the lack of trust within Scotland and the education system down there, and we've had a reshuffle in terms of the cabinet in England, and we've seen like with Gavin Williamson, and
Mm.
now with some of the things that the new education secretary is saying, that they don't have, these expertise that you're talking about when it comes to education. So how important would you say having, expertise in education is important for our education secretaries? I know it's kind of like a simple question, but it's nice to hear your opinion
I
on
think,
that.
I think it's well out of my area of expertise to even think about how education is kind of led at a government level. But obviously it does kind of make sense that whoever's in charge of education should have some sort of education background. I think that's probably a given. I think it's a very strange system where MPs are in charge of things that they may not have expertise in. I think it's a bit odd, but it's a
Yeah.
system we have. I think, and to be honest, I don't think that maybe I'm being naive, but whoever's education secretary or schools minister or anything like that never seems to influence what I do day to day. I'm sure other people will tell me, but they influence
Yeah.
policy and stuff like that. But for me, I think it's just about the school the school you're in, the people that you're working with, the people that you lead, and just try and control what you can, to be honest.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you, Nick. And I've just got 3 last questions. So I spoke about it briefly in the beginning of the show about, how your blog has helped me in this area. So what tips do you have for action plans? So and if you could briefly talk about 3 action planning mistakes and 3 ways to avoid them.
Oh, I hate action plans. I think
Yeah.
that when they're done, I think they can be done so badly and distract completely from the work that they're designed to try and support. I think the first one is that I don't think there's any agreement anywhere on all those words that get used, like objective, target, aim, success criteria,
Yeah.
milestones, outcomes. I think when I was supporting a school, I remember looking at the strategic plan that had been written, and there were 9 different words
Oh, wow.
that all pretty much meant the same thing, which was what they wanted to do, what they wanted to achieve. And I think no one ever you're kind of, you've got this lottery of experience in terms of what you see in terms of the people kind of above you, and then who you're with, in terms of what action planning is like. And I think you just pick up their habits rather than have any particular training in how to implement an idea, because it really just comes down to the whole implementation thing. An action plan is just the stuff you're going to do. I remember years ago having a conversation about an action plan where we couldn't agree on what a milestone was, and we went around for maybe a couple of days. And what I don't know what you mean by that. What is it that you mean? And then eventually we came up with some really silly things. Looking back, it's embarrassing. Things like the target was, you can tell what era it was in. The target was 100% good or better teaching in maths or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
And then the milestones ended up being something like, all right, in the spring term, it will be 75% of good or better teaching. And in the autumn term, it will be 50% good or better teaching. And we thought that was what we should be doing, like kind of trying to build up towards 100%. And the stupid thing was that even with the staff you got in school, it wouldn't even ever match up to a clean 50, 75%. It was stupid. It was so weird at the time. And I look back and I think, that there was such lack of clarity and an understanding on what action planning is and what you're trying to do, that we just kind of did stuff that we felt was useful, and it completely took away from the work that we actually had to do, which was to help teachers get better. So I think, the first problem is that lack of clarity around what it is that an action plan is, and that's, I mean, if you just get the aim right first, and then have a list of actions, surely that's enough.
I like that. And I think as well, like just touching on what you just said, like how the success will be measured. So having clarity in the measurement, what does it actually look like? TSCW said PTSD to old performance management targets.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That post-traumatic stress disorder is certainly an outcome of some crazy targets in the past.
Yeah.
I think but your bit on quality assurance as well, and checking is it makes people do silly things as well. So if there's a box on a plan that says how do you know, then it makes
Yeah.
people pick up that clipboard culture and go and check and hold people to account, because that's what leaders do.
Yeah.
Check that they're doing what they should be doing, which is not which is not what leaders should be doing. You have that checking isn't kind of a clipboard culture. That checking is seeing what help people need or removing obstacles so that they can do the things that we want to do. It's not seeing if they're doing what we want them to do and then telling them off if they're not, which is I'm sure we all recognize that kind of behavior.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And what
Yes,
tips? Oh yeah, sorry, carry on, Nick. Sorry.
the second one was teachers and leaders seem to have this in my experience, this way of using Microsoft Word that is the least efficient way you can ever imagine, where you've got 15 columns on a page where text goes 3 or 4 words and jumps to a new line. So you end up having a document that's 25 pages long because of how it's formatted. And then it's really hard to read. No one can read it. Things jump about all over the place. Things get deleted. It's the least efficient way of recording what you want to happen, how you're going to do it, and everything else. And I think that then takes time. Leaders spend their time fiddling with Microsoft Word and tables and documents rather than thinking about the stuff they want to do or doing the stuff they want to do. So it's a massive drain on time that could be better spent elsewhere.
Yeah, that is completely true. I definitely agree with that, because it doesn't get read as well. It doesn't get looked back on as well, especially if it's a long document, because we never have the time to sit there and read it.
No. Yeah. And then people put them in folders and put them on a shelf and then wave them in front of people, and as if that's proof of improvement or the work that's happening. Whereas all that is some sort of record keeping that you've done for someone else, rather than something that's useful for what it is you have to do.
Exactly.
I really don't like them.
TSCW said weighing the pig in quotation marks.
Absolutely, yeah. The pig doesn't get fatter by weighing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And then not my last question. My next question is, what tips do you have for establishing school values? Because as you said before, that in order to bring forth change, behavior has to be there. And I feel like behavior is at the mercy of values and how well values are implemented. So do you have any tips for establishing school values?
I think for me, values is about the people that work in the school. It's the colleagues that we work with, because how we all behave determines the climate. It determines how well we work together. It determines the success of the systems and everything else. So I suppose it's a way of the community behaving, not just children, but also kind of how we all go about making decisions. I think values should speak to everyone in the community. It should speak to the children. It should speak to the staff. It should speak to parents. They're what unify a community. It's what, and hopefully, I mean, the conversations we're having about this at the moment is what are the things that make you work here instead of some other school down the road? They're the things that make us, that draw us to this school. They're the things that we value. They're the things that we think are important. And harnessing those, I think, is a useful way of bringing people together, to make sure people belong, to make sure that they that are happy in where they work and where they come to school. That's what values are, I think, and and ultimately, I think they're there to guide decisions. If there's ever a decision to be made, it should always come back to whatever it is that we value. But I mean, it's quite interesting at the moment, because I'm asking lots of questions about this of staff in both schools, and it's really hard to disagree on values, because they're all positive. Everyone comes up with positive things, so it's almost impossible to actually settle on something, because everyone says quite valid things that are all positive, and because they're positive, we like to think that they're important, and we like to think that we do them and act them. So it's actually quite difficult to try and distill it into something that's memorable. And that's one of the first problems with values, is that we kind of have so many that they don't mean anything. You could have a list of 10 values on a school website, but because there's 10 of them, no one remembers them. No one knows what they mean. They're not, there's too many of them to be significant in our lives. So the first trick is just having few enough that people actually know them and remember them, and that they're not just random words. I think that's where you get into the kind of the laminated culture of putting the values on the wall, whereas they don't need to be on a wall. If that is how people behave and that's what people value, they don't need to be on a wall or on a lovely sticker somewhere in order for them to be relevant. They just are. So it's about conversations and not pictures and slogans and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's just like it should be embedded literally
Yes.
in the atmosphere, in the actions, in the everyday life of the school. And I
Yeah.
definitely agree. And TSCW has put through a clapping emoji. Thank you.
I think one other difficulty that we get into with things like school values is how they're phrased. So
Oh, that's a good point.
It's for example, it's quite common to have, like, for example, resilience as a you see it all the time in schools, and where they talk about what they value and their mission or something like that is resilience. But I've kind of an issue with that, because resilience, I don't think you can be resilient. Resilience is an outcome. It's an outcome of kind of your habits, and how you act. Whereas having it as a value, I mean, again, it comes down to that kind of expertise thing. Okay, so if resilience is important, how do I be resilient? And that's what values should speak to. They should kind of guide everyone in terms of what desirable behavior is. And being resilient is really hard. Like, imagine a 4-year-old telling a 4-year-old to be resilient. Yes, you need to kind of change the language a bit, but then why use resilience in the first place? If you have to change the language for everyone to understand it, resilience isn't the thing. That's not the thing that's important. It's the language that you actually end up using. And therefore, I think that having them as verbs is much easier to act on. So if for example, if it was resilience, you might have don't give up. That's much easier to act on. It's much easier to act on don't give up than it is to act on resilience. It's much easier to act on tell the truth than it is to have this value of integrity. I mean, integrity and resilience sound more impressive, but actually tell the truth and don't give up are far more actionable. People can do something with that, whereas the others are just too abstract, and it's hard to kind of put that across to the community.
Yeah, and it's just so simple for students, the pupils, to grasp. And you've just given me a aha moment, because it's even like with feedback. I remember when I first started giving feedback, writing EBIs or wishes, whatever people call them in schools nowadays, and using terms like develop explanation. But that's very abstract for students. And then I had to turn that develop explanation into a question so that they can actually, and put an arrow next to it so that students know how explicitly to develop that explanation. And sometimes I used to use words within the mark scheme, but that's very abstract to a student. So putting things into simple terms makes it, number one, doable, as you said, and number two, actionable. And I know we're not talking about feedback, but that is for feedback. I think that is the same process for feedback as well. Making it
talk
actionable.
for hours about feedback.
Yeah, making it actionable, doable. Yeah.
And I mean, on that feedback note, I mean, I have a real issue with that with written marking as well, because like, if you were to write, for example, in your example of explain it more clearly, if the child could explain it more clearly, they would have done it.
Yeah, so true.
And even if you had a really good pearl of wisdom that you could tell them to explain more clearly, writing it in their book and then them reading it is probably the least efficient way of giving them that information.
Wow.
especially if you're doing it 30 times.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Far more efficient to note that children's explanations need to be clearer, and then teach them all that the next day and get them to improve it, because it's a far better use of time than it is to write it 30 times and then remember to give it back to them, and then to action. Inevitably, there'll be children as well that you have to read it to or explain what you meant when you wrote it. So you're kind of doubling up on the workload and taking twice as long as you would if you just told them.
Yeah, such a good point. I love it. Yeah.
Not
This
a
is
fan
so
of
good.
marking.
And no, I don't think anybody is. I'd rather plan than mark any day.
Yes.
And just listening to you, it's just like these are just simple nuggets, you know. And I think leadership and education, it is based on common sense, but I think we overcomplicate it a bit. But actually, you've just really simple everything that you've actually said. It's just remind me of just basically just drawing it back, simplicity, literally.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think we overcomplicate things sometimes
I think
as
so.
in education.
I mean, I never wanted to be a head teacher. I couldn't remember ever being a time up until maybe mid-30s where I thought, okay, I want to do this now. There's a guy in early career and stuff, and I thought, no way, I don't want to do that. That sounds like far too much. But actually, it comes to a point where you think, I don't want to do it like that. I think I've got a better way of doing something, and that's how I ended up doing it, because I thought, I don't think that's important. I wouldn't do it like that. I'd do it like this. I think this is more important. And eventually, you end up with an opportunity to do it. And then that's great. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like that. That's literally the same process of me as like a HOD. I never actually wanted to be ahead of the year. And then I thought, I really want more stake in terms of curriculum design, and I really wanted to just go into curriculum design, and and as a result, HOD. And then my last question is, what should leaders know about the curriculum? I know this is a big one. It's a hefty.
It's massive, yeah.
Yeah, it's a hefty topic, but I see from my head teacher, for example, he's so knowledgeable about the curriculum. Like when he comes in, you know, to just pops in to lessons.
Yeah.
He just his comments about the lessons just shows how knowledgeable he is about the curriculum. And it's never generic. It's very subject specific. And I'm just always in awe. So yeah. So what do you think? What do you think all leaders should know about the curriculum?
I think there's a lot of I'll start with something really obvious, because it's despite being obvious, it's probably not understood, and it's knowing what the national curriculum says. It sounds ridiculous, but knowing, I don't know what it's like in secondary, but what is common in primary is that you have say schemes of work that might be written or bought in from somewhere else on, say, the geography curriculum, whatever. And teachers use that to teach lessons, and leaders kind of adopt that, and then it might go on for a year or two, and things might get changed here and there, and no one ever looks at the actual national curriculum to see what it is that children have to be taught, and the focus becomes on the scheme of work or the overview, which never ever gets challenged. So this was the case for many years with like the QCA units of work. I remember kind of being early career where year 5 taught rivers because they just did, and Egyptians was year 4 because it is, and it was never challenged. And I remember when the new Ofsted framework kind of came in, and it prompted people to go back to the national curriculum and look at their curricula and see, there's a huge chunk missing. Because we didn't realize that the scheme didn't have that planned well, or something along those lines. But yeah, definitely the first point, however simple and obvious it sounds, is to know the national curriculum inside out, because there's so much in there that we kind of take for granted. The first bit is, and this was a revelation for me as well, because I remember this exact moment a few years ago, of reading for the first time. And I can remember the purpose of study and the aims section of each subject.
Wow.
As a teacher, like if you were responsible for planning unit of work, you'd go to the subject content bit and say, right, what exactly do I have to teach? And it'll tell you this, that, and the other. But actually, there's so much about the subject itself in the purpose of study and the aims, which might become more naturally to secondary experts. But for primary, for me, it was a revelation, like about what history teaching actually is, and what the historical disciplinary knowledge is. And that's something that leaders need to know, is kind of the difference between substantive and disciplinary knowledge, the idea of sequencing and coherence, so those key concepts that thread throughout a curriculum. There's so much to the national curriculum just by reading it and thinking about it, and then comparing to what you've got. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for primary schools specifically, and small primary schools more so, because there's so few people to do the work around curriculum development.
That's a good point, especially because in primary schools, you guys have to teach everything. So it's not like you're an expert in that field.
And
yes,
in
it's
most
quite
schools,
tricky.
you might have no one who is an expert in anything. So I mean, I'm really, really lucky in my junior school that we've got a music specialist, someone who knows music really, really well. But if we didn't have the music specialist, you'd have to buy a scheme in order to make sure that the curriculum fits. The curriculum is fit for purpose, because no one would have the knowledge needed in order to say, no, you're missing this. That's not the best sequencing of concepts. That wouldn't make sense. You need someone who knows the subject. And in primaries, we can often have some subjects where we don't know. Computing is a huge one. Design technology, you're lucky if you've got someone who knows that well enough to contribute to curriculum design.
This is just really interesting. I've just loved this conversation, Nick. So thank you so much for joining us on Teacher Talk Radio. I just wanted to, for those that are listening live and also those that are going to listen back, how can people get in contact with you for more information, or even to join your course? What's the best way to contact you?
So on Twitter, it's at Mr. Nick Hart, which is probably the easiest way. I have a blog, which was named originally when I was a teacher, called This Is My Classroom, which is a little bit out of date now because I've more than one classroom, but the name
it's
sticks.
My schools.
Yes. And I also lead an MPQH course for Ambition Institute, which highly recommend, not just the headship qualification, but the new MPQs. They all look great. So through Ambition's website, that would be the best place to go for that.
Thank you so much, Nick. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And actually, just while we're on the Ambition Institute, I'm in the middle of applying for lead teaching, which is new. So I'm leading teaching. Yeah, that's what it's called. So I'm really excited about that.
They look
so
good.
hopefully I get onto that course. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I've learned so much. Honestly, this was like
very, very kind.
Free CPD. So I can't wait until more people listen back and gain the amount of knowledge that I have gained in today's show.
No, thank you, Emily.
So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and good luck in terms of the rest of your academic year.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
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 You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.